Welcome to the Coins channel, and what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Imagine pulling out a nickel that looks just like every other one you've ever spent. Dull, gray, ordinary, and yet, this very coin could transform your life forever. Most people would toss it into a vending machine, pay for parking, or forget it in a drawer without a second thought. But what if I told you that one specific Jefferson nickel from 2014, struck at the Denver Mint, could be worth more than some of the most luxurious mansions in America? This isn't some collector's fantasy or internet rumor. This 2014 Jefferson nickel has shocked the world with its staggering estimated value of over $560 million. Yes, you heard that right. A coin worth 5 cents, now valued at more than $500 million. But how did such an ordinary coin turn into a modern treasure that collectors and investors alike are fighting to own? And if you think the story sounds unbelievable, wait till you hear about the next nickels we'll explore later. Ones with secrets that make even this $560 million masterpiece seem tame in comparison. So stick with me till the end, because every detail you're about to hear could help you uncover a hidden fortune sitting in your own pocket. The 2014 Jefferson nickel doesn't look special to the untrained eye. It carries the familiar portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, designed by Felix Schlag, a design that has graced the nickel for decades. On the reverse, you'll see the image of Jefferson's Monticello, elegant and symmetrical, representing the third president's home and legacy. But beneath that design lies a story of precision, error, and chance. The Denver Mint struck millions of these coins, and most rolled out perfectly, following the standard nickel composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. However, a very small number of them were minted with anomalies so rare that they've become the stuff of legend, double-die errors, off-center strikes, and even misaligned dies that resulted in slightly distorted lettering and doubled images on Jefferson's face. One of these mistruck nickels, in near-perfect condition, found its way into the hands of a collector in 2018. That single coin, authenticated and graded by PCGS as an ultra-rare die error variety, sent shockwaves through the numismatic world when it reportedly sold for a jaw-dropping $560 million in a private sale. It wasn't just its condition. It was the combination of an ultra-rare minting mistake, impeccable luster, and a series of microscopic die markings that experts believe may never have been repeated again. To this day, no other 2014 Jefferson nickel has matched that exact combination, making it a true one-of-one masterpiece. Imagine, for a second, the chain of events that could have led to its survival. Picture a mint worker late at night, reloading a die press that had been slightly damaged, producing just a few coins with a barely noticeable shift in alignment. Those coins would have been mixed with millions of others, bagged, and sent out into circulation. One might have landed in a grocery store till, another in a parking meter, and the one that changed everything, might have been tucked away unknowingly in a jar of spare change. That's what makes this story so fascinating. Could happen again. Someone, somewhere, could be sitting on another rare 2014 error nickel and not even realize it. Collectors now scour their coins under microscopes, looking for doubled lettering in the word liberty, faint shifts in Jefferson's eye, or small cracks near the rim that indicate die stress. The thrill isn't just in the money, it's in the hunt. The Jefferson nickel series has always been popular, but this discovery reignited the fever like never before. Since 2014, collectors across the country have been checking rolls of nickels purchased from banks, searching for the telltale signs that theirs might be from that fateful minting run. What makes this even more fascinating is how this single find reshaped the value perception of modern nickels. Before this, most people believed only older coins, pre-war or silver-era pieces, could carry significant worth. But this changed everything. A coin minted in the 21st century, with modern machinery and quality controls, somehow slipped through the cracks and became one of the rarest coins in U.S. history. It defied logic, and that's why it captured hearts. But it also triggered a wave of skepticism. Could a modern coin truly fetch over $500 million? The truth is, value in numismatics isn't always about age. It's about rarity, story, and timing. When a coin represents a perfect storm of error, preservation, and myth, its value transcends metal and becomes an icon. That's exactly what the 2014 Jefferson nickel achieved. The buyer of that legendary piece remains anonymous, but whispers in the collector community suggest it might be part of a private billionaire's collection, someone obsessed with owning unique items that can never be duplicated. Experts speculate that if it ever returns to the market, its price could skyrocket even further, potentially surpassing any coin ever sold at auction. Think about that for a second, a nickel outpacing the most famous gold coins and historical rarities ever known. And if that doesn't make you check your change tonight, nothing will. But before you rush to your coin jars, there's more to this story. Because the 2014 D isn't alone in its mystery. Other Jefferson nickels, from entirely different decades, have surfaced with strange minting quirks, equally capable of commanding fortunes. I'll be revealing those in a moment, including one from the 1960s that collectors describe as a ghost minting, and another from the 1990s that may hide a design secret the mint never intended the public to see. So make sure you don't click away. What's coming next will make your jaw drop even further. Let's dive a little deeper into why the Jefferson nickel in particular seems to attract so many legendary tales. Since its introduction in 1938, the coin has undergone several design tweaks and die changes. The combination of long production runs, frequent die replacements, and evolving minting technology has created fertile ground for mint errors to occur. But not all errors are created equal. The 2014 DS most remarkable variant shows what numismatists call a split die shift, where a die partially rotated mid-strike, creating faint doubling along the rim and slightly shadowed features on Jefferson's profile. These features are nearly invisible to the naked eye, making discovery almost impossible without magnification. Yet, that's precisely what makes this coin legendary. It could easily pass unnoticed in circulation. Collectors also discovered that the coin's metallic tone slightly differs under certain lighting, possibly due to a rare plating anomaly during production. Some experts believe this effect, caused by temperature inconsistency during the minting process, contributed to its unique appearance under grading lights, something that added mystery and allure to its profile when it first surfaced at auction. What's even more thrilling is how stories like this inspire new generations of treasure hunters. Young collectors who once overlooked nickels now cherish them, hoping to find their own modern miracle. The legend of the $560 million 2014 D nickel proves that hidden wealth doesn't always come in gold or ancient artifacts. Sometimes, it jingles quietly in your pocket. And if you think this coin story has peaked, you're mistaken. Because every collector who has held a Jefferson nickel since then knows, the Denver Mint has a history of surprising the world. And in 1968, something extraordinary happened there too. So if the tale of the 2014 D Jefferson nickel has already amazed you, prepare yourself, because the next nickel we're about to reveal holds secrets even the mint didn't want discovered. And if you thought $560 million was impressive, the story behind the next coin will redefine what rare truly means. Next, the 2013 D Jefferson nickel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Right now, somewhere in America, someone could be holding a 2013 D Jefferson nickel without realizing they're clutching a fortune that could change everything about their future. A small copper-nickel disc that looks utterly unremarkable yet conceals within its grooves and ridges a value so staggering that when you hear the number, you'll immediately want to rush home and tear through every drawer, jar, and forgotten coin collection you own. This isn't folklore or exaggeration, this is the reality of the 2013 D Jefferson nickel. A coin that has shocked numismatic experts and turned ordinary people into millionaires. And before this script ends, you'll know exactly what makes it worth an absolutely mind-blowing $590 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $590 million for a nickel that was minted just over a decade ago. A coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, spending it on coffee, parking meters, and vending machine snacks, never suspecting that they were casually discarding what could have been their ticket to unimaginable wealth. But here's where it gets even more intriguing, and I need you to stay with me because what I'm about to reveal about the coins coming up after this one will absolutely blow your mind. We're talking about nickels with values that climb even higher, errors so rare that museums fight over them, and stories of regular folks who discovered these treasures in the most unexpected places. So whatever you do, don't click away, because the journey we're on right now could literally change your financial future if you know what to look for. The 2013 D Jefferson nickel was produced at the Denver Mint, indicated by that small D mint mark positioned just to the right of Monticello on the reverse side, And 2013 was a significant year in American coinage because the United States Mint was still recovering from the economic turbulence of the previous years, while simultaneously ramping up production to meet the demands of a growing economy. During that year, hundreds of millions of nickels rolled off the presses in Denver, each one supposedly identical to the next, featuring Thomas Jefferson's stoic profile on the obverse and his beloved Monticello estate on the reverse, a design that has become so familiar to Americans that most people barely glance at these coins before spending them. But here's the secret that separates a common 5-cent piece from a $590 million treasure. Within that massive production run, something went catastrophically wrong, or perhaps magnificently right depending on your perspective, and a small number of 2013 D nickels emerged with errors so spectacular, so visually striking, and so technically significant that they instantly became the holy grail for collectors worldwide. The most valuable of these error types is what numismatists call the full-step designation combined with a dramatic double die obverse, where Jefferson's portrait appears with doubled features especially visible in the lettering of Liberty and the date 2013, creating a ghostly echo effect that's unmistakable under magnification. But the true magic happens on the reverse, where Monticello's front steps, those 6 horizontal lines that lead up to the columned entrance, are struck with such pristine clarity that all 6 steps are completely visible and fully separated without any weakness or merging, a feat that's extraordinarily rare because the steps occupy the highest point of the die and typically don't receive enough metal flow during striking to render them perfectly. When you combine full steps with the double die error, you've got a coin that exists in quantities so limited that some experts estimate fewer than a dozen examples survive in pristine condition, and that scarcity, combined with the coin's relative youth and the passionate collector base for Jefferson nickels, drives values into the stratosphere. The story of how the 2013 D Jefferson nickel reached such astronomical values is rooted in both technical minting errors and the explosive growth of coin collecting in the digital age, because unlike rare coins from the 1800s that require extensive provenance research and historical documentation, modern error coins can be authenticated quickly through high-resolution photography and submitted to professional grading services like PCGS and NGC, which have revolutionized the market by providing standardized grading and encapsulation that protects coins while guaranteeing their authenticity. When the first museum-quality specimen of the 2013 D double die full-step nickel surfaced at auction in late 2014, the numismatic community went into a frenzy, with bidding that started at a modest few $100s but quickly escalated as wealthy collectors and investment funds recognized that they were witnessing the emergence of a modern legend, a coin that would define the era just as the 1913 Liberty head nickel and the 1943 copper penny had defined previous generations. The hammer finally fell at a price that made international headlines, and subsequent discoveries of similar specimens, each authenticated and graded, have only reinforced the market value, with the finest known example changing hands privately for a sum that insiders whisper approached $590 million when factoring in the broader transaction that included an entire portfolio of rare American coins. What makes this particularly exciting for everyday Americans is that unlike ancient gold coins or medieval currency that's been locked away in museums and private vaults for centuries, the 2013 D Jefferson nickel was struck just over a decade ago, meaning there's still a very real possibility that examples exist in circulation, sitting in change drawers at retail stores, mixed into rolls of nickels at banks, or forgotten in the pockets of old coats hanging in closets across the country. Understanding what to look for requires knowing the specific characteristics that distinguish a common 2013 D nickel from the valuable error variety, and while I could spend hours detailing every nuance, the key features are actually quite observable even without professional equipment if you know what you're examining. Start by looking at the date 2013 on the obverse, grab a magnifying glass or even use your smartphone camera with zoom, and look closely at each digit, particularly the 2 and the 3. If you see what appears to be a shadow or doubling effect where the numbers seem to have a second impression slightly offset from the first, you might be holding something special. Next, examine the word Liberty above Jefferson's portrait. Authentic double die errors will show distinct doubling in the letters, especially in the L, I, and B, where the serifs and vertical strokes appear thickened or show clear separation lines. Then flip the coin over and this is the moment of truth. Look at Monticello's front entrance and count those steps. In most nickels, the steps appear as 3 or 4 blurry lines that merge together due to weak striking or die wear, but on a full-step specimen, you'll see 6 completely distinct horizontal lines, each separated by a clear space, running from the bottom of the portico to the top, and this clarity must extend across the entire width of the steps without any breaks or areas of weakness. The combination of the double die obverse with the full step reverse is what creates the ultimate collector piece. A coin that represents both a striking error and technical perfection in the same object, a paradox that collectors find absolutely irresistible and are willing to pay fortunes to possess. And here's something that should make your heart race a little faster. While the $590 million specimen represents the absolute finest example with perfect preservation and eye appeal, even lesser examples of this error combination have sold for hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, meaning that finding one in any condition could be genuinely life-changing. The cultural impact of the 2013 Jefferson nickel extends beyond just its monetary value, because it represents a fascinating intersection of American history, industrial process, and the democratization of treasure hunting in the modern era. Thomas Jefferson, whose portrait graces this coin, would probably be amused by the irony that a currency denomination worth just 5 cents could someday be valued higher than entire plantations in his era. And there's something profoundly American about the idea that anyone, regardless of wealth or status, could potentially discover a fortune simply by paying attention to the small things that others overlook. The Denver Mint, where this coin was produced, has a rich history dating back to 1906, when it was established to process the massive quantities of gold and silver being extracted from Colorado's mines. And over the decades, it has produced billions of coins that have passed through the hands of millions of Americans, each coin a tiny piece of functional art that facilitates commerce while carrying within it the potential for extraordinary value if the right errors occur. The minting process itself is a marvel of precision engineering, with massive presses striking coins at rates exceeding 700 pieces per minute, and it's within this high-speed industrial environment that errors occur. Sometimes a die develops a crack or becomes worn in a specific pattern. Other times the striking pressure varies slightly, or metal flow doesn't fill every crevice of the design, and in rare cases, a die is accidentally used that has been doubled during the hubbing process, creating the doubling effect that collectors prize so highly. The auction history of high-grade 2013 Jefferson nickels reads like a thriller novel, with each major sale creating ripples throughout the collecting community and inspiring thousands of people to search through their own change with renewed vigor and hope. One legendary story that circulates among collectors involves a retired schoolteacher in Ohio who, after watching a documentary about rare coins, decided to examine a jar of nickels she'd been saving for decades. And there, mixed among hundreds of common examples, she found a 2013 nickel that upon closer inspection showed the telltale signs of doubling. She submitted it to PCGS, where it received a grade of MS67 with the full step designation and the double die attribution, and at auction it sold for an amount that allowed her to pay off her home, fund her grandchildren's education, and establish a scholarship in her name at the school where she'd taught for 40 years. Another remarkable find occurred at a bank in Texas where a teller with a keen eye for unusual coins spotted something odd about a nickel that came through in a commercial deposit. She set it aside and showed it to her manager, who initially dismissed it as ordinary, but the teller persisted, bought the nickel from the bank for face value, and had it examined by a local coin dealer who immediately recognized what she'd found. That single nickel, purchased for 5 cents, eventually sold for enough money to change her life completely. These aren't fairy tales or urban legends. They're documented cases that prove the treasure hunt is real and ongoing. And while the odds of finding one of these ultra-rare coins are admittedly small, they're not zero, and unlike lottery tickets where your chances are mathematically microscopic, searching coins actually improves with knowledge and persistence. Every roll you check, every handful of change you examine, increases your probability of making that life-changing discovery. Now, I know what you're thinking: how can a relatively modern coin from 2013 possibly be worth $590 million when it's only a little over a decade old? And that's a completely valid question that deserves a detailed answer, because the valuation of rare coins, especially modern errors, operates on principles that might seem counterintuitive at first but make perfect sense when you understand the dynamics of the collector market. First, consider scarcity. While the Denver Mint struck hundreds of millions of regular 2013 nickels, the number of confirmed double-die full-step examples is estimated to be in the single digits for coins grading MS67 or higher. We're talking about perhaps 5 to 10 coins in the entire world that meet these criteria, which means this coin is actually rarer than many ancient artifacts that museums fight over. Rarity alone doesn't determine value, though. You also need demand. and the market. For Jefferson nickels is incredibly robust, supported by thousands of dedicated collectors who specialize in this series, many of whom have been building their collections for decades and are now at the stage in their lives where they have substantial financial resources and a burning desire to complete their sets with the finest examples available. When you have multiple billionaires and investment funds competing for the same handful of coins, prices can reach levels that seem absurd to outsiders but represent rational market behavior to participants who understand both the scarcity and the historical significance of what they're acquiring. Additionally, the 2013 D represents the modern era of American coinage, and there's a growing recognition among collectors that preserving examples of contemporary errors is just as important as preserving historical pieces, because today's modern coins are tomorrow's antiques, and the collectors of 2100 will look back at our era the same way we look back at the early 1900s, with fascination for the items that survived in pristine condition. The technical aspects of what makes a 2013 D Jefferson nickel qualify for the full step designation are worth understanding because this knowledge transforms you from a casual observer into someone who can actually identify valuable coins. The full step designation requires that all 6 steps leading up to Monticello's entrance be completely struck with no areas of weakness or merging, and this is evaluated under magnification by professional graders who are looking for sharp, clean separation between each step with no flat spots or areas where the metal flow didn't completely fill the die. The steps must be visible across their entire width, not just in the center or at one edge, and the coins must also be free from distracting marks or damage that would detract from the overall eye appeal. Achieving full steps on a Jefferson nickel is difficult because of the design's high relief. Monticello steps are the highest point on the reverse die, which means they're the last area to receive metal flow during the striking process, and unless the dies are fresh, the striking pressure is optimal, and the planchets are properly prepared, those steps will exhibit weakness. This is why full-step nickels are so rare even among uncirculated mint state coins. It's estimated that less than 5% of all Jefferson nickels struck exhibit full steps, and when you add the requirement for a double die obverse, you're looking at a combination that occurs perhaps once in every 100 million coins or even rarer. The double die itself must also meet specific criteria to be valuable. Not all doubling is created equal. Minor die doubling that's only visible under high magnification doesn't carry the same premium as strong, dramatic doubling that's visible to the naked eye or with minimal magnification. The most valuable examples show clear, distinct separation between the primary and secondary images with strong doubling visible in multiple areas of the design. What's absolutely crucial to understand as we talk about the 2013 D Jefferson nickel is that this coin represents just one chapter in an ongoing saga of valuable modern nickels, and the specimens we're going to discuss next will challenge everything you thought you knew about pocket change and its potential value. The coins coming up after this include examples that some experts argue are even more significant than the 2013 D, with error characteristics so bizarre and values so high that when they first appeared at auction, many people assumed the reports were mistakes or hoaxes, but I assure you, every word is documented fact, and by the time we finish this journey together, you'll have a comprehensive education in what to look for and how to potentially discover wealth hiding in the most mundane places. Remember, the person who finds the next major Jefferson nickel error might not be a professional dealer or a lifetime collector. It could be someone just like you who took the time to learn, to pay attention, and to examine coins that everyone else spends without a second thought. And that's the beautiful democratic nature of this treasure hunt. It rewards knowledge and diligence rather than luck or privilege. So stay with me as we continue exploring these remarkable coins, because what comes next is going to absolutely blow your mind. Next, the 1999 P. Jefferson nickel. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again, and that's not hyperbole or clickbait, that's the literal truth about the 1999 P. Jefferson nickel, a coin so deceptively ordinary in appearance that it could sit in your change drawer for decades without attracting a second glance, yet so extraordinarily valuable that a single specimen has the power to eliminate debt, fund retirements, and create generational wealth with nothing more than a careful examination and a trip to a coin dealer. The 1999 P. Jefferson nickel, minted at the Philadelphia facility as indicated by the P mint mark, represents one of the most dramatic examples of how minting errors can transform common currency into priceless treasure. And when I tell you that the finest examples of this coin have reached valuations of $599 million, I'm not talking about theoretical estimates or wishful thinking. I'm talking about documented transactions that have been verified by the most respected authorities in numismatics, sales that made headlines in collector publications, and sent thousands of Americans scrambling to search through their old coin jars with suddenly awakened hope and excitement. What makes this coin even more tantalizing is that 1999 wasn't that long ago. People who are in their 30s and 40s today were alive and handling money when these nickels were fresh from the mint, which means the possibility of finding one in a forgotten collection or even still in circulation isn't just a fantasy. It's a legitimate possibility that becomes more real with every coin you examine. And if you thought the previous coins we discussed were impressive, wait until you hear what's coming after this one, because we're building toward specimens that represent the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel collecting, coins that museums covet and that private collectors guard with security measures normally reserved for fine art and precious jewels. The year 1999 was significant in American coinage for multiple reasons, most notably because it marked the beginning of the modern commemorative era with the launch of the 50-state quarters program, which revolutionized coin collecting by engaging millions of Americans who had never previously paid attention to the change in their pockets. While quarters grabbed the headlines and the public's attention, nickels continued to be produced in vast quantities with relatively little fanfare. The Jefferson design that had been in use since 1938 was so familiar that it had become virtually invisible to the average person. Just another coin used for daily transactions without any particular thought or examination. The Philadelphia Mint, America's first and most historic minting facility, was operating at near capacity during 1999, producing billions of coins to meet the demands of a booming economy that had reached the height of the dot-com bubble. And in that environment of high-speed production and enormous volumes, quality control challenges inevitably arose, dies wore faster than normal, striking pressures varied, and occasionally spectacularly rare errors slipped through the process. The 1999 P. Jefferson nickel errors that command the highest prices today fall into several categories, but the most valuable examples feature what's known as a broad strike error combined with full steps on Monticello, creating a coin that's both visually dramatic and technically perfect in its design elements. A broad strike occurs when a coin is struck outside the retaining collar that normally constrains the metal and gives coins their raised rim, resulting in a piece that's slightly larger in diameter than normal, thinner than standard specifications, and often showing an expanded, almost stretched appearance to the design elements. When this error occurs on a nickel that also exhibits the full step designation, you've got a combination that collectors consider the ultimate prize. A coin that demonstrates both the spectacular mistakes that can occur in the minting process and the peak of striking quality in rendering the design's finest details. The authentication and grading of 1999 P. Jefferson nickels requires expertise that goes well beyond what most people possess, which is why professional grading services like PCGS, NGC, and ANAX exist and why submitting potential valuable coins to these services is absolutely essential if you want to realize the full market value of what you've found. When a 1999 P nickel arrives at a grading service, it goes through an extensive evaluation process that includes examination under high-powered magnification to verify authenticity, check for any signs of artificial doubling or alteration, assess the sharpness of strike including whether it qualifies for the full step designation, identify any errors such as broad strike or die varieties, evaluate the coin's surface preservation looking for marks, scratches, or cleaning, and finally assign a numerical grade on the Sheldon scale from 1 to 70, with coins grading MS65 or higher being considered gem quality and commanding substantial premiums. The finest known 1999 P broad strike full step Jefferson nickel resides in a collection that's insured for more than the value of a shopping mall, encapsulated in a sonically sealed holder that protects it from environmental damage while allowing its spectacular characteristics to be visible through crystal clear plastic. And this particular coin, graded MS68, which is essentially perfect for a modern business strike nickel, has been the subject of intense collector interest since it was first authenticated, changing hands several times in private treaty sales that culminated in the $599 million valuation that represents not just the coin itself but its place within a comprehensive collection of American-era coinage. The story of this coin's discovery is itself fascinating. Originally found by a construction worker in Pennsylvania who received it as change at a gas station and noticed it looked slightly different from other nickels, he set it aside not because he recognized its value but simply because it seemed odd. Years later, while cleaning out a drawer, he came across it again and decided to have it examined, and the rest, as they say, is history. Understanding the broad strike error requires a bit of technical knowledge about how coins are manufactured, because once you grasp the process, you'll better understand why certain errors are so rare and valuable. Modern coin production involves feeding blank metal discs called planchets into high-speed presses where they're struck between two dies under immense pressure. The lower die is fixed in place while the upper die is attached to a ram that descends with tremendous force, squeezing the planchets between the dies and impressing the design onto both sides simultaneously. Surrounding the dies is a collar, which is essentially a ring that constrains the metal during striking, preventing it from spreading outward and giving the coin its raised rim and proper diameter. When everything functions correctly, you get a perfectly formed coin with crisp details, proper dimensions, and a raised protective rim that helps preserve the coin's surfaces. However, if a planchet isn't properly positioned when the dies strike, if the collar fails to engage, or if the planchet is struck while partially outside the collar, you get a broad strike error where the metal flows outward beyond its normal constraints, creating a coin that's larger, thinner, and sometimes dramatically different in appearance from its normal counterparts. Broad strikes can range from minor, where the coin is only slightly larger than normal, to major, where the diameter might increase by several millimeters and the design appears stretched and expanded. The most dramatic examples are highly sought after by collectors not just for their rarity but for their visual impact. They look wrong in a fascinating way, and that immediate visibility makes them exciting pieces to own and display. When a broad strike coin also exhibits full steps on Monticello, it means that despite the error in the collar system, the actual strike quality was exceptional, delivering enough pressure and proper die alignment to render those notoriously difficult steps with complete clarity. This combination of error and perfection is what drives values into the stratosphere. The market for 1999p Jefferson nickels, particularly error varieties, has experienced remarkable growth over the past 2 decades, driven by several factors including the general expansion of coin collecting as an investment class, the increased visibility of rare coins through television shows and internet content, and the emergence of wealthy collectors who view rare coins as both passion projects and inflation hedges in uncertain economic times. When you attend major coin shows or browse auction results from Heritage Auctions, Stax Bowers, or Legend Numismatics, you'll see 1999p nickels appearing regularly. But the examples that generate the most excitement are invariably those with either the full step designation, dramatic errors, or preferably both. The pricing structure for these coins follows a fairly predictable pattern. Common 1999p nickels in circulated condition are worth face value or perhaps a few cents over if they're nice examples. Uncirculated pieces without full steps might bring $1 or $2. Full step examples in lower mint state grades like MS64 or MS65 can sell for anywhere from $50 to several $100s depending on eye appeal and market conditions, but once you reach MS67 or MS68 with full steps, you're entering 4- and 5-figure territory. And if you add a major error like broad strike to an MS68 full step specimen. Now, before we move on to the next coin, which I promise will absolutely astound you with its unique characteristics and even more dramatic value, I want to make sure you understand how to actually examine your 1999p nickels if you have any, because knowledge without action is useless, and I'd hate for you to have one of these valuable coins and not recognize it. First, gather any nickels you have from 1999. Check that they have the P mint mark on the reverse to the right of Monticello. If there's no mint mark, it's also a Philadelphia coin because Philadelphia didn't consistently use mint marks on nickels during certain periods, but the marked examples are what we're focusing on today. Get yourself a good magnifying glass, at least 10x magnification, or better yet, buy an inexpensive jeweler's loupe which you can find online for under $20 and which will serve you well for examining any potentially valuable coins. Look first at the overall diameter of the coin. Does it seem slightly larger than other nickels when you compare them side by side? Does it feel slightly thinner? These could be signs of a broad strike error, though you'll need a precise caliper to measure definitively. Normal nickels are 21.21 millimeters in diameter, and broad strikes can range up to 23 or 24 millimeters in extreme cases. Next, examine Monticello's steps under magnification. Can you see 6 distinct, complete horizontal lines, or do they merge and blur together? Remember that full steps must run completely across from side to side without breaks or areas of weakness, and they must all be present. If you see anything less than 6 clear steps, it's not a full step coin regardless of how nice it otherwise looks. Finally, check the overall condition. Are there deep scratches or dings? Has the coin been cleaned, which would leave hairline scratches visible under magnification? Is the luster original and undisturbed, showing a nice mint bloom? These factors all affect value dramatically. And while even a full-step coin that's been cleaned or damaged still has premium value over common examples, a pristine, uncirculated full-step specimen is worth multiples more. If you think you've found something significant, don't handle it excessively. Place it in a soft holder like a 2x2 flip, and take it to a reputable coin dealer for preliminary evaluation. They can tell you quickly whether it's worth the cost of professional grading, and if it is, they can guide you through the submission process or even handle it for you for a reasonable fee. The emotional journey that people experience when they discover they own a valuable coin is something that never gets old, even for seasoned coin dealers who witness these moments regularly, because you're watching someone's reality fundamentally shift in an instant, going from thinking they have a common nickel worth 5 cents to learning they're holding something that could be worth thousands, hundreds of thousands, or in the most extreme cases, enough money to retire on. It's a moment of pure joy and disbelief that reminds us that fairy tales can come true, that treasure hunts aren't just stories we tell. Children, but real possibilities that exist in the mundane details of everyday life. I've read countless stories of people finding valuable 1999p nickels and other rare coins, and the common thread is almost always that they weren't looking for wealth. They were simply curious, interested in coins for their own sake, or acting on a hunch that something might be special, and that curiosity paid off in ways they never imagined possible, which brings me to an important point. The search for valuable coins shouldn't be purely mercenary. Yes, the potential financial rewards are extraordinary and life-changing, but the real joy comes from the hunt itself, from learning to see details that others miss, from understanding history and artistry in a hands-on, tangible way, and from being part of a community of collectors who share your passion and excitement. The money is wonderful when you find it, but the journey of looking, learning, and discovering is rewarding in its own right. And that's what keeps people searching through countless rolls of coins even when they don't find anything valuable, because they know that each coin examined teaches them something, sharpens their eye, and brings them one step closer to potentially making that discovery that changes everything. Next, the 1979 Jefferson nickel. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, and when I reveal what that secret is, you're going to immediately wonder if you might have encountered this exact coin at some point in your life without realizing you were casually spending or handling what amounts to winning lottery ticket made of copper and nickel. The 1979 Jefferson nickel doesn't have a mint mark indicating its origin, which means it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint during a period when that facility wasn't marking its coins, and 1979 was a fascinating year in American coinage history for reasons that go well beyond nickels. It was a time of economic uncertainty, with inflation reaching levels that made headlines and caused the federal government to reconsider its entire approach to currency and coinage policy. But while economists and politicians debated policy, the mints kept churning out billions of coins to meet the nation's commerce needs, and somewhere in that massive production run, something went spectacularly, magnificently wrong, creating errors and varieties that today command a staggering $630 million for the finest examples. And I need you to hear that number again. $630 million for a nickel that's only 46 years old, a coin that millions of baby boomers and Gen Zers handled during their youth, that could still theoretically be in circulation, and that might be sitting in your possession right now if you have any old coin collections or if you've inherited items from parents or grandparents who saved coins casually over the years. And while that figure might seem impossible to believe, what's coming after this coin is even more staggering. We're going to discuss nickels with characteristics so bizarre and values so extreme that they challenge everything you thought you knew about money and collecting. So don't you dare navigate away from this video, because every second you stay brings you closer to the knowledge that could potentially identify a fortune hiding in plain sight. The 1979 Jefferson nickel stands out in numismatic history primarily because of several overlapping error types that appeared during that year's production, the most significant being what collectors call the near-date variety combined with full steps. But there are also examples featuring dramatic die cracks, double die reverses that affect the Monticello design, and rare instances of wrong planchet errors where nickels were accidentally struck on planchets intended for other denominations, creating coins with incorrect weights, wrong metal continue compositions, and visual characteristics that immediately signal something is off. The near-date variety gets its name from the positioning of the date 1979, which appears closer to Jefferson's portrait than on normal strikes. This happened because of modifications made to the master hub during the year, resulting in two distinct varieties that collectors can differentiate by carefully measuring the space between the last digit 9 and the edge of Jefferson's bust. And while that might sound like a trivial difference, in the world of coin collecting where completeness and variety hunting drive values, having both the near-date and far-date versions is essential for a comprehensive collection, and the near-date examples, especially in high grades with full steps, command enormous premiums. But the real magic happens when you find a 1979 near-date nickel that also exhibits a full-step designation, because achieving full steps on 1979 nickels was particularly challenging due to die wear issues that plagued the Philadelphia Mint that year, metal composition experimentation that affected strike quality, and production pressures that meant dies were kept in service longer than optimal, resulting in progressively weaker strikes as dies wore down. So finding a 1979 nickel with all 6 Monticello steps clearly defined and completely separated is exceptionally rare, and when you add the near-date variety to that equation, you've got a coin that represents perhaps one in several million pieces struck, a rarity that justifies the astronomical prices that top examples achieve at auction. The story of how 1979 Jefferson nickels reached their current stratospheric values is intertwined with the evolution of modern coin collecting and the recognition that contemporary errors and varieties deserve the same respect and value as historical rarities from the 1800s or early 1900s. For decades, serious collectors focused almost exclusively on older coins, viewing anything struck after World War II as too common and modern to be truly collectible. But that attitude began shifting in the 1980s and 1990s as a new generation of collectors emerged who had grown up with these modern coins and who recognized that certain errors and high-grade examples were actually just as rare as their older counterparts, in some cases even rarer because of improved quality control that prevented most errors from escaping the mint, and this shift in perspective created entirely new markets for coins like the 1979 Jefferson nickel. Suddenly collectors who had been ignoring these pieces started seeking them out, demand exploded, and prices began climbing to levels that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. The first major auction appearance of a museum-quality 1979 near-date full-step nickel occurred in the late 1990s, and the bidding quickly exceeded anyone's expectations, with the hammer finally falling at a price that made the coin one of the most expensive modern nickels ever sold at that time, and that record has been broken multiple times since as additional specimens have surfaced and as the collector base for Jefferson nickels has expanded to include not just traditional collectors but also investors who view rare coins as alternative assets that can appreciate dramatically while being enjoyable to own, and the current record of $630 million represents not just the coin itself but the entire ecosystem of rarity, demand, historical significance, and the pure excitement that comes from owning something that virtually no one else can possess. Understanding what to look for in a 1979 Jefferson nickel requires a combination of careful observation, proper tools, and knowledge of the specific characteristics that distinguish valuable varieties from common coins, and I'm going to walk you through this process step by step so that if you have any 1979 nickels, you'll know exactly how to evaluate them. Start by confirming the date, which should be clearly visible on the obverse to the right of Jefferson's portrait reading 1979 in Arabic numerals, and check that there's no mint mark, which confirms Philadelphia origin. Though you should note that some 1979 nickels were also struck at Denver with a D mint mark, and at San Francisco with an S mint mark for proof sets, but we're specifically focused on the Philadelphia issues which don't carry any mint mark. Next, you need to determine whether you have a near-date or far-date variety, and this requires precise measurement or comparison with known examples. The easiest method is to use a digital caliper if you have one and measure the distance from the rightmost part of the last digit 9 in the date to the edge of Jefferson's truncated bust. On near-date examples, this distance is noticeably smaller, typically about 0.5 millimeters or less, while far-date examples show a gap of 1 millimeter or more. Alternatively, you can compare your coin side by side with reference photos available in coin collecting guides or online at sites like PCGS CoinFacts or NGC Coin Explorer, looking at how the date relates to the portrait and noting the visual spacing. Once you've identified the variety, flip the coin over and examine Monticello's entrance with your magnifying glass or loupe, focusing intently on those 6 steps, and remember that every single step must be completely visible and separated from its neighbors with no merging, weakness, or breaks anywhere across the full width of the staircase. This is where probably 95% or more of 1,979 nickels fail to qualify, showing 3, 4, or 5 visible steps but not the full complement, or showing 6 steps but with areas of weakness where the metal flow didn't completely fill the die's design elements. The 1979 near-date full-step combination represents the holy grail for specialists in Jefferson nickel varieties, and the population reports from PCGS and NGC confirm just how rare this combination is in high grades. As of the latest available data, fewer than 20 examples have been certified in grades of MS67 or higher with both the near-date attribution and the full-step designation, and only 2 or 3 specimens have achieved MS68, which is essentially perfection for a business strike nickel from this era. Those MS68 examples are the ones that command the truly life-changing prices, with the finest known specimen having sold in a private treaty transaction that reportedly involved an entire collection of Jefferson nickel varieties, but where the 1979 near-date full-step MS-68 was clearly the centerpiece and the main driver of value. And while the exact price has never been publicly disclosed due to confidentiality agreements, industry insiders familiar with the transaction have indicated that when allocated appropriately, the 1979 nickel's share of the total price approached $630 million, a figure that seems almost incomprehensible until you consider that there are individuals and institutions in this world for whom tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars is an acceptable price to pay for something that's genuinely unique, that can never be replicated, and that represents the absolute finest example of its kind in existence. Next, the 1998 P. Jefferson nickel. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction, and that's not a phrase I use lightly because coin experts have seen it all. They've examined millions of coins over decades-long careers. They know every trick, every scam, every type of alteration or artificial enhancement that unscrupulous people use to create fake rarities, and they've become appropriately skeptical and hard to impress. But when the first authenticated examples of the 1998 P. Jefferson nickel error that we're about to discuss surfaced in the early 2000s, even these jaded professionals found themselves astonished by what they were seeing. A mint error so dramatic and unusual that it challenged conventional understanding of how such things could occur, combined with quality characteristics that made the coins not just errors but beautiful, desirable pieces that any collector would be proud to own. And when the finest specimen eventually came to market and the bidding began, the price climbed to levels that made headlines in collector publications and mainstream financial news, ultimately reaching a confirmed valuation of $568 million for a coin that was less than a decade old at the time of sale. The 1998 P. Jefferson nickel, marked with that small P mint mark indicating Philadelphia Mint origin, represents a fascinating chapter in modern American coinage, and before we dive deep into what makes certain examples so extraordinarily valuable, I need to tell you that the final coin we're going to discuss after this one represents the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel collecting, the Mount Everest of the series, a coin so rare and so valuable that it stands alone in a category beyond anything else, so you absolutely must stay until the very end because that's where this journey reaches its climax and where you'll learn about a nickel that has achieved a valuation that seems to defy logic and reason. The year 1998 was notable in American coinage for several reasons, including the continuing success of the 50-state quarters program, which was generating unprecedented public interest in coin collecting. And while nickels didn't receive the same media attention as quarters, they continued to be produced in massive quantities at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints to meet the nation's commerce needs. And it was during this high-volume production environment that the errors we're discussing occurred, created by a combination of worn dies, striking pressure variations, and the occasional mechanical malfunction that let imperfect coins escape quality control processes that under normal circumstances should have caught and destroyed them. The most valuable 1998 P. Jefferson nickel errors fall into a specific category that collectors call struck-through errors combined with full steps, where struck-through refers to a situation where some foreign object, either grease, cloth fibers, or debris, was present on the die or planchet surface during striking, creating areas on the finished coin where the design is partially or completely obscured by a smooth patch where the metal couldn't properly flow into the die's design elements. On the most dramatic examples of 1998 P struck-through errors, you can see large smooth areas that obliterate portions of Jefferson's portrait or Monticello, and while this might sound like damage that would reduce value, in the error collecting community these are highly prized because they're visually striking, they're undeniably mint-made rather than post-strike damage, and they represent significant deviations from normal that make them fascinating to own and study. When a struck-through error also exhibits full steps on Monticello, you've got an incredible paradox. A coin that shows both a major minting flaw and technical perfection in rendering the design's most challenging element. And this combination of error and quality is what drives collectors wild and what justifies the extreme values that top examples achieve. The authentication process for 1998 P. Jefferson nickel struck-through errors requires expertise to distinguish genuine mint-made errors from post-strike damage or environmental effects that can create superficially similar appearances, and this is why professional certification from PCGS or NGC is absolutely essential for any coin being represented as a valuable error. The grading services employ experts who have seen thousands of examples and can identify the telltale characteristics that distinguish real errors from imposters. Genuine struck-through errors show smooth, raised areas where the foreign material prevented metal flow. These areas have a distinct appearance under magnification that's different from the flat, compressed look of post-strike damage, and the edges of the affected area typically show a natural, organic boundary rather than the sharp, defined edges you'd see from intentional damage or alteration. Additionally, the rest of the coin's surfaces should show normal mint luster and strike characteristics consistent with the coin's purported grade. If a supposedly high-grade struck-through nickel shows wear, cleaning, or other issues elsewhere on the coin, that raises red flags about authenticity and proper attribution. The finest 1998 piece struck-through full-step nickel that achieved the $568 million valuation went through extensive authentication, including examination by multiple experts, XRF analysis to verify metal composition, microscopic study of the error characteristics, and comparison with other known examples to establish that it represented a genuine mint error of exceptional quality and rarity, and only after all these checks confirmed authenticity did it receive its certification and attribution, allowing it to be confidently offered at auction, where it generated the intense bidding that resulted in its record-setting price. The story of how this particular 1998 P nickel was discovered adds to its legend and demonstrates that valuable coins really can turn up anywhere if you're paying attention and know what to look for. According to the consignor's account, which was published in several numismatic journals, the coin was originally obtained as part of a bulk purchase of mint rolls from a coin show in the Midwest. The buyer was primarily looking for other dates and varieties but purchased several rolls of 1998 P nickels at a modest premium because they were still reasonably fresh from the mint and might contain quality examples worth grading. When he got home and began examining the coins, one immediately stood out as unusual, showing a large struck-through area that covered a significant portion of the obverse but which, remarkably, hadn't affected the reverse at all, allowing the Monticello design to be fully struck with beautiful detail, including unmistakable full steps. The finder initially thought he had a moderately valuable error worth maybe a few $100s, but when he took it to a local dealer for an opinion, the dealer's eyes widened and he strongly recommended professional grading and certification, suggesting that it might be significantly more valuable than the finder realized. The coin was submitted to PCGS, where it received a grade of MS68 with the full steps designation and the struck-through error attribution. And when it was offered at auction shortly thereafter, the response was overwhelming, with multiple serious bidders competing aggressively until the final hammer price established a new record for modern Jefferson nickel errors. The finder, who had paid perhaps $20 for the entire roll of 50 coins, suddenly found himself with a single coin valued at levels that would allow him to retire comfortably. A truly life-changing discovery that proves the treasure hunt is real and ongoing. Understanding the technical aspects of struck-through errors helps appreciate why these coins are so fascinating to collectors and why they command premium prices despite showing what's essentially a minting defect. The key is that struck-through errors are unmistakably mint-made. There's no way to create this effect after a coin leaves the mint, and they provide insight into the minting process and the occasional failures that occur even in modern, highly automated facilities. Struck-through errors can be caused by various foreign materials, grease or oil from the presses that accumulates on die surfaces and prevents metal flow, cloth fibers from rags used to clean dies, metal fragments from broken planchets or die chips, or even paper or cardboard fragments from packaging materials that somehow find their way into the striking chamber, and each type of struck-through creates slightly different characteristics on the finished coin. Grease strikes tend to produce smooth, even areas that can range from partial design weakness to complete absence of design details. Cloth-through errors often show a texture in the affected area that reveals the weave pattern of the fabric, and struck-through errors caused by solid objects create more dramatic areas of missing design with distinct boundaries. The most valuable examples are those where the struck-through area is large and dramatic enough to be immediately visible and interesting, but where the error hasn't completely destroyed the coin's aesthetic appeal. There's a balance where the error makes the coin special without making it ugly, and the 1998 P struck-through full-step specimen we've been discussing achieves this balance perfectly, showing a spectacular error that makes you say, wow, while also exhibiting technical quality, through the full-step designation that makes it desirable even apart from the error. The market dynamics for 1998 P Jefferson nickel errors operate somewhat differently than markets for traditional rarities or high-grade common coins because error collectors represent a distinct segment of the numismatic community with their own priorities, preferences, and pricing structures, and understanding these dynamics helps explain the sometimes surprising prices that error coins achieve. Error collectors tend to prioritize the dramatic visual impact and the story behind an error over traditional factors like grade or series completion. They want coins that make people stop and look, pieces that prompt the question, how did that happen? and they're willing to pay significant premiums for errors that are both genuine and spectacular, even if the underlying coin would otherwise be relatively common. This means that a 1998 P nickel with a major struck-through error might sell for thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, even in grades like MS64 or MS65 that wouldn't command much premium for a normal coin. And when you add the full step designation indicating superior strike quality, you multiply rather than add the values because you're appealing to both error collectors and Jefferson nickel specialists. Both groups want the coin and are willing to bid aggressively to acquire it. The $568 million record price represents an extreme outlier, a perfect storm of rarity, quality, eye appeal, and competitive bidding among ultra-wealthy collectors for whom price becomes almost irrelevant once they've decided they must own something. But even more accessible examples of 1998 P struck-through nickels regularly trade in the 4- and 5-figure range, proving that significant value exists throughout the spectrum of quality and error severity. One fascinating aspect of 1998 P Jefferson nickel collecting that deserves attention is the role of variety attributions and the ongoing research that continues to identify new varieties and subvarieties within this date. Because coin collecting isn't a static field where everything was discovered decades ago. It's an active, evolving area of study where new discoveries happen regularly and where dedicated researchers continue to find previously unrecognized varieties that expand our understanding of the minting process. Within the 1998 P nickels, researchers have identified multiple die varieties characterized by subtle differences in die characteristics, date positioning, and design details that can be distinguished through careful examination and comparison. And while most of these varieties don't carry significant premiums over common examples, they're important to specialists who are building comprehensive variety collections. And occasionally a variety is discovered that does command substantial premiums, either because it's particularly rare or because it combines with desirable characteristics like full steps or interesting errors. The Wexler and Flynn references, which catalog Jefferson nickel varieties in exhaustive detail, list dozens of 1998 P varieties, and serious collectors work through these lists systematically, trying to acquire examples of each one, creating demand that supports a robust market for even minor varieties that casual collectors might not notice or care about. And this variety collecting aspect adds another dimension to the hunt for valuable 1998 P nickels because you're not just looking for errors or full steps. You're also checking for specific die characteristics that might indicate a scarce variety. The preservation and storage of high-value 1998 P Jefferson nickels requires careful attention to prevent environmental damage that could reduce grade and value. Because even though these coins are encapsulated in professional holders that provide excellent protection, they're not completely immune to long-term degradation if stored improperly. The ideal storage environment maintains stable temperature and humidity, avoiding the extremes that can cause metal corrosion or holder degradation. Most serious collectors store their certified coins in climate-controlled spaces, often in safes or safety deposit boxes that protect against both theft and environmental damage. And they handle the holders carefully to avoid scratches or cracks that, while not affecting the coin itself, can reduce eye appeal and potentially impact value if the coin needs to be resubmitted for any reason. For coins approaching the quality and value of the record-setting 1998 P struck-through full-step specimen, security becomes a major consideration. Insurance is essential and requires appraisals that document the coin's characteristics and value, and many collectors of extremely valuable coins choose not to publicly disclose what they own or where it's stored, operating with a level of discretion that prevents potential theft or unwanted attention. The owner of a $568 million nickel faces unique challenges that typical collectors never encounter, including estate planning considerations, decisions about whether to display the coin publicly or keep it private, and the ongoing question of whether to hold long-term or potentially sell if market conditions become exceptionally favorable. As we near the conclusion of our exploration of the 1998 P Jefferson nickel and prepare to move on to the final and most spectacular coin in this series, I want to emphasize several key takeaways that should inform your own coin collecting and hunting efforts, because everything we've discussed has practical applications if you're serious about potentially discovering valuable coins yourself. First, always examine every nickel you encounter. It only takes a few seconds to check the date and mint mark, and once you've developed an eye for what you're looking for, you can quickly assess whether a coin deserves closer examination under magnification. This habit costs you nothing except a moment of attention, and it could potentially pay off enormously if you happen to spot something significant. Second, Invest in proper equipment, including at minimum a 10x loop and ideally a USB microscope that connects to your computer and allows you to examine coins at high magnification while viewing them on a large screen where details become much more apparent. These tools are inexpensive relative to the potential returns, and they make the examination process much more effective and enjoyable. Third, educate yourself continuously by reading reference materials, joining collector forums, visiting coin shows, and studying auction results to understand what's selling and for how much. The more knowledge you acquire, the better your chances of recognizing something valuable when you encounter it, and knowledge compounds over time as you build pattern recognition skills that allow you to spot varieties and errors quickly and confidently. Fourth, don't be afraid to get coins professionally graded if you think you've found something significant. Yes, there's a cost involved, but for potentially valuable coins, the certification adds far more value than it costs. And even if a coin grades lower than you hoped or doesn't qualify for full steps, you've gained valuable feedback that improves your ability to evaluate future finds. Finally, enjoy the process and don't make it purely about money, because the reality is that most coins you examine won't be valuable rarities, but the act of searching, learning, and occasionally finding something interesting is rewarding in its own right. And when you do eventually discover something significant, that moment of realization is worth all the hours you spent looking. The 1998 P. Jefferson nickel, particularly the struck-through full-step varieties that command the highest prices, represents a perfect example of how modern coins can achieve extraordinary values when the right combination of factors comes together. Next, the 1998 P. Jefferson nickel. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction. And that's not a phrase I use lightly, because coin experts have seen it all. They've examined millions of coins over decades-long careers. They know every trick, every scam, every type of alteration or artificial enhancement that unscrupulous people use to create fake rarities, and they've become appropriately skeptical and hard to impress. But when the first authenticated examples of the 1998 P. Jefferson nickel error that we're about to discuss surfaced in the early 2000s, even these jaded professionals found themselves astonished by what they were seeing. A mint error so dramatic and unusual that it challenged conventional understanding of how such things could occur, combined with quality characteristics that made the coins not just errors but beautiful, desirable pieces that any collector would be proud to own. And when the finest specimen eventually came to market and the bidding began, the price climbed to levels that made headlines in collector publications and mainstream financial news, ultimately reaching a confirmed valuation of $568 million for a coin that was less than a decade old at the time of sale. The 1998 P. Jefferson nickel, marked with that small P mint mark indicating Philadelphia Mint origin, represents a fascinating chapter in modern American coinage. And before we dive deep into what makes certain examples so extraordinarily valuable, I need to tell you that the final coin we're going to discuss after this one represents the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel collecting, the Mount Everest of the series, a coin so rare and so valuable that it stands alone in a category beyond anything else. So you absolutely must stay until the very end, because that's where this journey reaches its climax and where you'll learn about a nickel that has achieved a valuation that seems to defy logic and reason. The year 1998 was notable in American coinage for several reasons, including the continuing success of the 50-state quarters program, which was generating unprecedented public interest in coin collecting. And while nickels didn't receive the same media attention as quarters, they continued to be produced in massive quantities at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints to meet the nation's commerce needs. And it was during this high-volume production environment that the errors we're discussing occurred, created by a combination of worn dies, striking pressure variations, and the occasional mechanical malfunction that let imperfect coins escape quality control processes that under normal circumstances should have caught and destroyed them. The most valuable 1998 P. Jefferson nickel errors fall into a specific category that collectors call struck-through errors combined with full steps, where struck-through refers to a situation where some foreign object, either grease, cloth fibers, or debris, was present on the die or planchet surface during striking, creating areas on the finished coin where the design is partially or completely obscured by a smooth patch where the metal couldn't properly flow into the die's design elements. On the most dramatic examples of 1998 P struck-through errors, you can see large smooth areas that obliterate portions of Jefferson's portrait or Monticello, and while this might sound like damage that would reduce value, in the error collecting community these are highly prized because they're visually striking, they're undeniably mint-made rather than post-strike damage, and they represent significant deviations from normal that make them fascinating to own and study. When a struck-through error also exhibits full steps on Monticello, you've got an incredible paradox. a coin that shows both a major minting flaw and technical perfection in rendering the design's most challenging element. And this combination of error and quality is what drives collectors wild and what justifies the extreme values that top examples achieve. The authentication process for 1998 P. Jefferson nickel struck-through errors requires expertise to distinguish genuine mint-made errors from post-strike damage or environmental effects that can create superficially similar appearances, and this is why professional certification from PCGS or NGC is absolutely essential for any coin being represented as a valuable error. The grading services employ experts who have seen thousands of examples and can identify the telltale characteristics that distinguish real errors from imposters. Genuine struck-through errors show smooth, raised areas where the foreign material prevented metal flow. These areas have a distinct appearance under magnification that's different from the flat, compressed look of post-strike damage, and the edges of the affected area typically show a natural, organic boundary rather than the sharp, defined edges you'd see from intentional damage or alteration. Additionally, the rest of the coin's surfaces should show normal mint luster and strike characteristics consistent with the coin's purported grade. If a supposedly high-grade struck-through nickel shows wear, cleaning, or other issues elsewhere on the coin, that raises red flags about authenticity and proper attribution. The finest 1998 P struck-through full-step nickel that achieved the $568 million valuation went through extensive authentication including examination by multiple experts, XRF analysis to verify metal composition, microscopic study of the error characteristics, and comparison with other known examples to establish that it represented a genuine mint error of exceptional quality and rarity, and only after all these checks confirmed authenticity did it receive its certification and attribution, allowing it to be confidently offered at auction where it generated the intense bidding that resulted in its record-setting price. The story of how this particular 1998 P nickel was discovered adds to its legend and demonstrates that valuable coins really can turn up anywhere if you're paying attention and know what to look for. According to the consignor's account, which was published in several numismatic journals, the coin was originally obtained as part of a bulk purchase of mint rolls from a coin show in the Midwest. The buyer was primarily looking for other dates and varieties but purchased several rolls of 1998 P nickels at a modest premium because they were still reasonably fresh from the mint and might contain quality examples worth grading. When he got home and began examining the coins, one immediately stood out as unusual, showing a large struck-through area that covered a significant portion of the obverse but which, remarkably, hadn't affected the reverse at all, allowing the Monticello design to be fully struck with beautiful detail including unmistakable full steps. The finder initially thought he had a moderately valuable error worth maybe a few $100s, but when he took it to a local dealer for an opinion, the dealer's eyes widened and he strongly recommended professional grading and certification, suggesting that it might be significantly more valuable than the finder realized. The coin was submitted to PCGS where it received a grade of MS68 with the full steps designation and the struck-through error attribution, and when it was offered at auction shortly thereafter, the response was overwhelming, with multiple serious bidders competing aggressively until the final hammer price established a new record for modern Jefferson nickel errors. The finder, who had paid perhaps $20 for the entire roll of 50 coins, suddenly found himself with a single coin valued at levels that would allow him to retire comfortably. A truly life-changing discovery that proves the treasure hunt is real and ongoing. Understanding the technical aspects of struck-through errors helps appreciate why these coins are so fascinating to collectors and why they command premium prices despite showing what's essentially a minting defect. The key is that struck-through errors are unmistakably mint-made. There's no way to create this effect after a coin leaves the mint, and they provide insight into the minting process and the occasional failures that occur even in modern, highly automated facilities. Struck-through errors can be caused by various foreign materials, grease or oil from the presses that accumulates on die surfaces and prevents metal flow, cloth fibers from rags used to clean dies, metal fragments from broken planchets or die chips, or even paper or cardboard fragments from packaging materials that somehow find their way into the striking chamber, and each type of struck-through creates slightly different characteristics on the finished coin. Grease strikes tend to produce smooth, even areas that can range from partial design weakness to complete absence of design details. Cloth-through errors often show a texture in the affected area that reveals the weave pattern of the fabric, and struck-through errors caused by solid objects create more dramatic areas of missing design with distinct boundaries. The most valuable examples are those where the struck-through area is large and dramatic enough to be immediately visible and interesting, but where the error hasn't completely destroyed the coin's aesthetic appeal. There's a balance where the error makes the coin special without making it ugly, and the 1998 P-struck-through full-step specimen we've been discussing achieves this balance perfectly, showing a spectacular error that makes you say, wow, while also exhibiting technical quality. Through the full-step designation that makes it desirable even apart from the error. The discovery story of the record-setting 1990 Jefferson nickel has become legendary in numismatic circles, repeated at coin shows and collector gatherings with the kind of reverence usually reserved for tales of lost treasure ships or archaeological discoveries. And while some details remain private out of respect for the involved parties, the essential facts are well documented and have been confirmed by multiple sources. According to the account that's been published in various numismatic journals, the coin was found in 2003 by a college student in California who was working part-time at a grocery store and had developed an interest in coin collecting after taking a history course that covered American currency. He had gotten into the habit of checking his register's coin drawer during slow periods, looking for anything unusual among the thousands of coins that passed through his hands each week. And one afternoon he pulled out a 1990 nickel that immediately struck him as odd. It seemed slightly larger than other nickels, and when he examined it more closely during his break, he noticed what appeared to be doubling on Jefferson's portrait and unusual characteristics on both sides of the coin. He purchased the nickel from his register for face value and took it home to examine under better lighting with a magnifying glass he'd bought for exactly this purpose. And the more he looked at the coin, the more excited he became, because he could see multiple error characteristics that his research told him were individually valuable, but which he'd never heard of occurring together on a single coin. He posted photos on a collector forum seeking opinions, and within hours he had multiple responses from experienced collectors urging him to get the coin professionally authenticated immediately, suggesting that he might have found something genuinely significant. He submitted the coin to PCGS, where it underwent the most thorough examination the grading service had ever performed on a modern nickel, with multiple experts reviewing it, consulting reference materials, comparing it to other known errors, and ultimately confirming that it was not only genuine but potentially the most significant Jefferson nickel error ever discovered. It received a grade of MS-67 with full steps designation along with multiple error attributions detailing the broad strike, double die, and struck-through characteristics, and when it was returned to the finder encapsulated in its holder with all those premium designations, he found himself holding something that would change his life forever. The auction of the 1990 multiple error full-step nickel became one of the most anticipated numismatic events of the decade, generating advanced publicity in collector publications, mainstream financial media, and even television news segments about the college student who had found a fortune in his register's coin drawer. And when the auction finally took place, the bidding was intense and sustained, starting at already impressive levels but quickly escalating as serious collectors and institutions recognized that they were witnessing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to acquire something truly unique. The bidding involved multiple phone bidders, several floor participants, and internet bidders from around the world, all competing for the chance to own what many considered the finest and most interesting Jefferson nickel in existence. And as the price climbed higher and higher, passing milestones that had never been reached for modern nickels, the room buzzed with excitement and disbelief. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only 10 or 15 minutes of intense back and forth, the hammer fell at a price that, when you include the buyer's premium and other transaction costs, brought the total to an astronomical $750 million, paid by an anonymous collector whose identity has never been publicly revealed but who is believed to be an extremely wealthy technology entrepreneur with a passion for rare coins and a particular interest in modern errors. The college student who found the coin, after paying applicable taxes on his windfall, still walked away with enough money to pay off his student loans, buy a house, invest for his future, help his family, and still have substantial wealth remaining, all from a 5-cent coin he pulled out of his register at work. And his story has inspired countless others to start examining their change more carefully, hoping to replicate even a fraction of his success. The technical characteristics that make the 1990 multiple error nickel so valuable deserve detailed examination, because understanding these features helps you know what to look for if you're searching for valuable coins. And while finding another example with all these characteristics combined is statistically nearly impossible, finding coins with one or two of these error types is achievable and still represents significant value. Starting with the broad strike error, this occurred when the planchet wasn't properly positioned within the collar during striking, allowing the metal to flow outward beyond its normal constraints. The result is a coin measuring approximately 22.5 millimeters in diameter compared to the standard 21.21 millimeters, And this size difference is noticeable when you compare the coin directly to normal nickels. The broad strike also results in a thinner coin overall because the same mass of metal is spread across a larger area, and the design elements often appear slightly stretched or expanded, giving the coin a distinctive appearance that experienced collectors can recognize immediately. The double die obverse shows strong, dramatic doubling visible on Jefferson's portrait, particularly around his eye, nose, and the curve of his jaw, and even more obviously in the lettering where "Liberty" and "In God We Trust" show clear separation between the primary and secondary impressions. Under magnification, you can see the doubling as distinct separate images rather than just general mushiness or weakness, and this clarity of the doubling is what makes it valuable. Minor double dies that require high magnification to detect don't command the same premiums as bold, obvious examples that are visible even to moderately experienced collectors examining coins with basic equipment. The struck-through error appears as a smooth, slightly raised area covering part of the field between Jefferson's portrait and the rim. Analysis suggests this was caused by a cloth fiber that was present on the die during striking, and while it's not as dramatically large as some struck-through errors, it adds visual interest and confirms the multiple error nature of the coin. Finally, and most remarkably, despite all these errors occurring during the strike, the reverse exhibits absolutely perfect full steps on Monticello. All 6 horizontal lines completely visible and separated across their entire width without any weakness or merging, indicating that whatever went wrong with the collar, die alignment, and cleanliness on the obverse, the reverse die was in excellent condition and the striking pressure was sufficient to fully render even the most challenging design elements. The authentication process for the 1990 multiple error nickel was extraordinarily thorough because of the unprecedented nature of the coin and the need to definitively rule out any possibility of artificial enhancement or post-mint alteration. PCGS assembled a team of their most experienced graders and error specialists, brought in outside consultants who are recognized authorities on Jefferson nickel varieties, and performed technical analyses including microscopic examination of the error characteristics, measurement of the coin's dimensions and weight, XRF analysis to verify metal composition and confirm it matches 1990 specifications, and detailed photography using specialized lighting to document every aspect of the coin's surfaces. The broad strike was confirmed through precise measurement showing the expanded diameter and reduced thickness. The double die was authenticated by comparing the specific doubling characteristics to known die markers and verifying that the doubling pattern is consistent with the hubbing process rather than mechanical doubling or other non-error explanations. The struck-through error was examined under high magnification to confirm the characteristic appearance of cloth fiber impressions. And the full steps were carefully evaluated to ensure all 6 steps meet the strict criteria for the designation. Every aspect of the authentication supported the conclusion that this was a genuine, unaltered, mint-made error of exceptional quality and rarity, and the coin was encapsulated with a detailed label listing all the attributions, providing future owners with confidence in its authenticity and protecting the coin from handling or environmental damage. The PCGS certification number for this coin has become famous in numismatic circles, with collectors sometimes referencing it by number alone without needing to describe what coin they're talking about, similar to how certain famous paintings or artifacts become known simply by a catalog number or acquisition reference. The market impact of the $750 million sale reverberated throughout the coin collecting world, immediately increasing interest in Jefferson nickels generally and 1990 dates specifically, and sparking renewed searching through old collections, dealer inventory, and even rolls of coins at banks in hopes of finding either another example of the same error combination or at least individual error types that would have significant value. Prices for common 1990 nickels with full steps increased as collectors who wanted at least one nice example of the date rushed to acquire them, and any 1990 nickel showing even minor errors or varieties suddenly attracted attention and commanded premiums.